Okay, hi everyone, this is SmithyQ from SmithyQ.com, and I'm here with another video analysis. This one is going to be for a friend. He reached out, he asked for me to look at a game, so here it is. He played Black, it was online, it was a 30-minute time control game, and both players are rated around 1300 online. So that'll give you context. It kind of puts this in they're better than beginners, but they're not quite firmly in that intermediate range. And so it's a hard spot to give advice, because sometimes people just hang pawns and pieces and that sucks, and other times it's more the middle game nuances that we need to look at. And so there's going to be a bit of both as we go through here. So hopefully you found this useful. Now, one thing I just want to say this right away. 1 second. Okay, I found it. So this here is all the notes that he gave me as he was looking through the game, which is absolutely fantastic. And I'm happy to analyze games for people when I have time. And if you can put your notes, like, look at this. This is a page and a half of analysis. And he said that it was hard because he's rarely had to write about chess. If you like chess, or if you want me to look at a game, if you could put that level of detail in when you send me a game, it makes my job easier, because then I can give you more advice, but also it's going to really help you. Like, just even the act of analyzing is absolutely incredible. So let's jump in. So again, he was Black and he played c5. I'm not going to talk about the choice opening too much. I will say, in my personal experience, when I played the Sicilian as Black, when I was under 1400, it was terrible, and I lost a lot of games. And this kind of makes sense, because the Sicilian leads to very complex double-edged positions, even if people play random moves, right? Not mainline theory. And so if you like the opening, keep playing it by all means. However, there will become games where you lose and you don't know why. And that's going to happen if you play the Sicilian, if you play the Modern, the Perk, those types of openings. So I'm going to put that out there. And again, if you like playing them and you get good results, you like the games, then keep doing it. But if you don't, well, maybe you can switch. So he took with the queen, and we developed, and he goes right back. So okay, not bad at all. From here, we got some pretty standard developing moves from Black. I decides to go for the fianchetto. Okay. Knight c3, bishop g7, we're both castling, bishop b5, knight f6, castle, castle, bishop takes c6, b takes c6. And then he says, up to here, these are standard moves, but it was around here things felt different. So this would be the first unsure of what to do. Or at least it's not very obvious. So let's look at this position. And in fact, I'm going to say this right here, is that years ago, I played a game in a very similar structure. In fact, I believe the Black position is identical. The white position, there was some differences. And I'm going to analyze that and post it once I find it in my database. Is it so that way you can compare how I played it? I guess I think I was 1800 at the time, with how you played it. So let's look at this. And if we were to analyze this, or we want to look at this, what should our thought process be? What should we notice, and what should we be thinking about doing? So the first thing, is that we've got more center pawns. In particular, this d5 push, if we can get that, it's going to be great. If we played right now, it gives him the possibility of playing e5. Okay, we move the knight somewhere, he's probably going to protect the pawn. And we're going to get a structure like this. Is it good? Is it bad? It's probably all right. I'm not sure if it's the best we can do. That said, in the Sicilian, if we ever have this c6 pawn, which helps control d5 and helps control b5, so all of a sudden this knight doesn't do much, one of the main things we want to think about is getting the d5 push in. Now, whether we do it right away or we prepare it a little bit, it's up to the nuances of the position. But to me, what jumps out to me is e5. Now, I'm sure your first thought is, hold on, I got a bishop here, and now it's stuck staring behind my pawn, like, this is the worst move ever. And I get that a little bit, but this pawn isn't going to stay here. It's actually going to be really, really simple. We're going to play bishop to e6. Maybe we'll play h6 first, just to prevent, any knight g5s. Just get that out of the table. We're going to move the queen somewhere, maybe to e7. We're going to bring the rooks over. Maybe we'll put this rook on the b file just to harass this. And then we're going to push d5. And once we get d5 in, we have an amazing position. In fact, let me just put that. Let's just make a random move here, just so we could see something here, right? Okay, we got to imagine that the e-pawn is covered. All right. Okay, sorry, it's my turn. Let's go queen e7, king e8, bishop e6, king back. I know this is a complete fantasy, but once we get d5 in, once we pair it well enough, all of a sudden, these pawns are going to march. And everything is amazing. If this pawn moves, the bishop comes to life. Alternatively, we can simply move this knight somewhere, and then get the f5 pawn going. Right? And once we get these center pawns, white is going to be in trouble. White is going to be hugely on the defensive. And so, okay, it's going to take some time. It's going to take, 5, 7, 10 moves to prepare it. But there's very little white can do to stop it. We simply have more control of the d5 square, precisely because, if we back up, he voluntarily took. And so whenever, and this happens fairly frequently in the Sicilian, at certain levels, is white will exchange a knight, sometimes a bishop, usually a knight, on this square. And our main thought should be, can we get d5 in? There we go. There are some other nuances, though. Again, because this pawn's on c6, we got an open b file. And so it makes perfect sense at some point to throw the rook over. In fact, we can just do it right now. Because now we can't develop this bishop. And he'll have to make some type of defensive move to in the near future. He only really has two options. It'd either be rook b1, and his rook is very, very passive. Look at how ours is active. If we want to, say, we have the option of bringing the rook up, where it's attacking the pawn, say, or then we could double behind it, or something, right? Like, it gives, don't do that. It's an option. Well, his rook is just stuck being very, very passive. The other option, we could play b3. That's also very weakening because of our bishop, right? And so we can imagine moving this knight somewhere with a discovered attack. It's also a pin. We could think about potentially playing, a5, a4, trying to weaken it here. Maybe c5, c4. I mean, maybe not. But it gives us options, possibilities. And also, a very thematic would be queen a5. Let me just get rid of some of these arrows. Queen a5, so it attacks this guy, and the queen shoots all the way over. All right, so it controls the this fifth rank here. So rook b8 is a very thematic move. And it probably makes sense to play it before he develops his bishop. And there are some times, especially among beginners, I remember where I'd play this, my opponent completely misses it, and I just win a pawn. That's something that you always need to be aware of around here. One other thing we can look at is simply asking where all our pieces want to go. We talked about the rook. We know it wants to go here. Where does the queen want to go? It probably wants to go to either a5 or to c7. On c7, I'll just put that on the board. This is indirectly controlling e5. So that way we could later push e5 and d5, and the queen's really, really happy. Again, once we play e5, we can put the bishop on e6, and it's great. Alternatively, we could throw the bishop over here onto a6, where it's hitting the rook. It's got a nice open diagonal. Maybe good things could happen. And we can put our rooks anywhere. But our main thrust should be pushing in the center. So when I look at this position, especially after h3, I'm thinking pushing d5. Maybe not this exact second, but that should be the plan in some respects. And this is true in almost any Sicilian position where white makes a trade and you end up getting this c6 pawn. As a general rule, that is what you want to focus on. So in the game, he played bishop b7. He made the note that, he wasn't completely sure, so he decided to put the bishop here to try and pressure the e-pawn. Now, this isn't a terrible move. It makes some sense trying to pressure the pawn, and the bishop does help support the d5 advance. That said, putting the bishop here, it stops this rook b8 idea from doing anything. It stops us from putting the bishop on e6, which may be a better square. And as we'll see, at any point, white is able to play e5, and the pawn simply isn't there. It's also really easy for white to gang up on the e-file, and we have no other way of applying pressure to this pawn. Right? Okay, so the knight can attack it, the bishop can maybe attack it. That's about it, right? There's nothing else we can really do. And so hitting the pawn, again, it's not the worst thing in the world. It's just, it's not the most prudent, or it's not necessary, or the position doesn't demand it. It demands something a little bit different, pushing d5. It's still going to the center, not so much e4. Rook e1, then you played a6, because you said you wanted to protect b5. So if you were to play c5 right away, what's going to come to b5? Are you worried about the knight? What's the knight do there? You can just kick it back now, then it's wasted tempi. There's very little reason to play this move. In fact, now your bishop can't go to a6 anymore on the long diagonal. Playing a6 is a complete waste of a tempi. And your thought process here, you're thinking, I want to stop protect b5. But b5 doesn't matter. Look at your last move. Why'd you play bishop b7? You played bishop b7 because you want to attack the pawn. And now you're switching. Now you're playing a6. You want to protect b5. And so you're thinking about all these different things. You want a central focus, right? And the central focus in this position should be to get this d5 in. All of our moves should be, in some way or another, going about this. Whether we're just bettering our position first to make it so that way he can't develop his bishop, maybe we're stabilizing the center, we're developing, we move the queen to protect d5. All of these moves are designed to help us eventually push in with the d5. And instead, we got the bishop b7 because we want to attack, and we play a6 because we want to defend, and we play c5 because we want to attack, and then he was able to take, and push in with e5. Now, if I were to ask you, all right, this is a tactical puzzle, black to move, win material, what do you do? And here, if you approach it that way, you're much more likely to see. All right, so this pawn's attacked. You know, oh, frig, I suck at arrows. It's attacked. Come on, are you serious? It's attacked twice. It's defended twice, but one of the defenders is attacked. So you could have simply taken it. It's also hitting the queen, so he has to take back. Then you take this, and you would have won a pawn. So that's a possibility here. If you haven't, there's a very good YouTube video by GM Smirnov. What is it? I think it's called The Most Common Mistake, in which he talks about this, in which you want to look for captures on the opponent's half of the board, because very often they can start a tactical sequence, and for you, this is just absolutely textbook. Take, you win a pawn. So instead, you take with the pawn, he takes back. And so just look what's happened here, is that on the plus side, you have two bishops, which is great, and they're nice and open. They got nice, good diagonals. However, he's really improved his knight, which blunts this bishop, and your pawn structure is a little bit funky. Just a little bit, right? Not as good as it was a few moves ago. Certainly not as good back here, if you imagine we got the e5, whoops, come on, arrows are funny, e5 and d5. Then you take the knight. Not liking that too much, for a couple of reasons. Again, bishops are generally better than knights. Okay, this is a really good knight, I agree. Bishops are generally better, especially in open positions, and this position is about as wide open as you can get. Right? There's absolutely nothing stopping either of your bishops. And this knight can be moved. You mentioned that you wanted to play queen b6, but you're worried about this knight d7 with a fork. which is true. It would have given you an option, though, of playing queen c6, where now you're threatening mate. So he has to defend that, and then you can move this rook somewhere. Give you some time. Now, okay, he's going to take. You can take either with the queen, or you can take with the pawn. And this is an interesting position. You got a bit of tempi here. I'm not sure who's better, honestly, but it's certainly a position. And so you mentioned, though, right, so bishop takes e5 isn't the best move, right? Playing queen b6, right? Good idea. Right idea. And you just missed the idea of coming here. Another possibility would have been to play queen c7. If he tries again with knight d7, again, same thing. We can get the rooks in, or we can do it with here. It's going to be pretty much the exact same thing. I'm not too worried about knight d7. And the real advantage of moving the queen is that if he doesn't do that, our next move, the d file is open, so we can move one of our rooks over, harass his queen, again, gain more tempi. Get all of our pieces into the game. So those are two possibilities we could have done instead of taking. Because the problem with taking is that he exchanges queens, and then after rook takes e5, he's simply going to win a pawn. Right? There's nothing you can do about it. What next? I want you to notice something. Okay, let's look at the next three moves. So you play rook e8 to defend the pawn. So he wins that pawn. Then you play rook d7 with the idea of doubling your rooks. So we just back up. So this takes us 1, 2, 3 moves. Notice how you could have played rook d7 here to defend the pawn. Then after he takes, you bring other rook over. The exact same idea, right? But one tempi less. We're one move, further ahead. We could immediately threaten to come down, or something, what have you. And so by playing rook e8, what it looks like here is that you got stuck looking at, okay, he's attacking things, so I have to defend it. And while you were thinking that, you were only thinking that, defense, right? You weren't thinking about your plan until this move, after he took, right? We almost, it's so important to always think about what is my plan. What do I want to do? Because if we only think about, defending, then that's how our opponent starts pushing us around, and then we get stuck really, really, really passive, and we don't want that. And so I would urge you to always keep in mind what you want to do. Even here, yeah, you have to do, okay, you're going to lose the pawn regardless. So what's the best way to lose it? How can we gain the most activity? Right? How can we try and get our play in? And so if we play, again, as you did in the game, that's a tempi that we lost. Then you come all the way. Actually, this is right. You come all the way in with rook d2, right? Right here, it's even possible to come all the way down here. Now you might be worried about him coming here. Okay, we move the bishop. He's got to defend this pawn, right? Maybe he goes here. Okay, maybe we play some f5. Maybe we get e5. This is taking away this square from the knight. Maybe we start pushing pawns. Let's see what happens. This is a possibility, right? Because again, we're faster. Is it better? I don't know, but you're definitely going faster. And if at this level, around the 1300s, up to about 1500, so many people lose time, right, with things like this rook e8 and this rook d7 all the way then before we come into the 7th rank here, that if you can capitalize even on a few of them, your position comes from, equal to better, or from better to winning, just by winning these few tempi. Anyway, let's look. So he played b5, and you played rook c8. And, oh my goodness, see how, again, your thought process is muddled. Okay? So first you defend, all right? Then we double. You come all the way down, and then you move the rook over. Notice how this rook made 3 moves, to e8, to d8, to c8 to exchange with rooks. Tempi is everything. And here, you could have played rook takes c2. It's a little bit scary, I know. But the double rooks are simply overpowering here. And you're thinking, yes, you're going to lose a piece. But you know what? After this, he can't defend g2 anymore. And you've got pretty much perpetual check. In fact, if we look at this line that the computer shoots out, knight e4, you check, he moves over. You play rook h2. Would you be threatening mate? That's not too bad. If he comes back, we just check him. You know, if he goes here, we check him. He goes here, we check him. He goes here, we move right back. And again, we've always got this. It's at least a draw. In fact, it's even possible for white to start making mistakes here, where he's gonna fall down. Notice how if he allows this and it's not mate, it's also a skewer. Right? You got possibilities here. Now, one thing to actually look at this variation, to get into this rook takes c2 with all the rooks down here, is you need to maybe not understand. You need to be able to evaluate this position as your worse. Right? Right here. After b5, right? And this kind of, hopefully this makes sense because you're down material. Right? He's got an extra pawn, and all things being equal, he's going to win in the endgame. So if you can think about that and say, I'm happy with the draw, and then if you, sorry, not that. And if you know how powerful the doubled rooks are, how, especially with the king on the back rank, he has no defense, very common drawing tool. And in fact, if he doesn't do this, if he doesn't bring his rook all the way down, then your doubling is going to suddenly give you the advantage, right? Getting your rooks here is far more important. Getting doubled rooks is almost always more important than just trading off his one active rook. 2 rooks on the 7th rank are almost always better than just 1 rook here. Take, 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 take. Just for the record, your opponent could have played this here. You can't take the pawn because of this. You're going to lose your piece. And so you'd be forced to exchange rooks. You maybe do this. And this is almost certainly losing. A losing endgame, just because his 2 passed pawns are very, very fast. And yes. But fortunately, your opponent didn't do that. He took this guy. You took back. Then he played rook d1. So see how we got his move order mixed up? You took this pawn, and suddenly the game's equal. Perfect. Even material. You've got a bishop. He has a fairly dangerous pawn, but it's not really that dangerous. Your bishop is blockading it. The knight's going to have to move. And so this means you can always throw this guy back here at any time, and that's it. In fact, this is kind of the main lesson I want you to think about in this position, because in your notes, you said that you were struggling for ideas. Weren't completely sure what to do. Your guiding principle should be get rid of this pawn. Get your rook behind it, win it, and you're fine. Okay, so he can take this pawn. That's great. He's going to move somewhere. You take that. And it's completely equal. You've taken away his most dangerous weapon. And this is probably a draw, but again, 1300s, who knows? Now you're fine. Alternatively, the fork doesn't work because you can just take here, and then after take, take, you've actually have chances for a win because you're the one with the extra pawn. And so your main thought in this position, right, he has a dangerous pass pawn, right, a pawn that could become a queen very, very quickly, is you want to think, get your rook behind that pawn. And this will be a theme for the next little bit. Okay, so you played bishop e2, which, okay, not the most pressing thing. Again, get the rook behind. It's not losing, right, but it's not, the main thing the spirit demands in this position. You go here, you go there, and you play king f8. And honestly, because his rook is always here at this pawn, it makes a lot of sense to play e6, either now or soon, just so that way his rook, his knight can never hit it. You have no pawn weaknesses here, and it makes it easier to gang up on this guy. So at a certain point, you probably want to play e6. You play king f8, okay, bring the king in, that makes sense. Knight f4, attacking the bishop, bishop moves. And then there's one more idea here. In the battle between bishop and knight, there's a very common idea of putting the bishop 2 squares away from the knight. And what happens is that the bishop completely corrals the knight. The knight, okay, it could move, here, but you have the option of taking it. He can't move forward anywhere. Look what you did in the game. You played bishop a6, and that gave him a chance to play knight d5. He's attacking this pawn, and that's when you blundered, when you played e6, and then you walked into that fork. Whoops. Right? Didn't have to happen. Right? You could have played this. You could have let the pawn drop and just target his pawn instead, right? But e6, and then you're down. There's actually one more thing I want to say before we wrap up. In this position, you played f5. And then once he went here, he's like attacking all your pawns, and you gave up, which makes perfect sense, backing up. As a defender in this position, you shouldn't resign right now, even though you're down a piece. This is actually a very difficult position to win for white. I'm not sure if I could do it against, even, a intermediate opponent. Just because a knight and a rook versus just a rook, I don't think that's a win. I'm pretty sure that's a table-based draw. And so what you should do here in this position is you simply drop your rook here, you put your king on g7, and you just throw your rook back and forth on this rank. One of the most common ideas is just put the rook here, and here, because the rook's always defended, on one of these squares. And then you ask white, how do you win this position? And it's tough, right? He has no passed pawns. It's really hard to attack you. If he tries to bring his king in, you've got 1,000 checks. You're okay. And one of the most common rules, especially in the endgame, is if you're worse, you're down a piece, right? So you're pretty worse, is you don't move pawns. Because when you move pawns, you create weaknesses, right? Maybe you can get away with h5. Maybe. But I still don't like that, because that takes a square away from your rook. Again, when you can put your rook here and just go back and forth all day. And you could try that. You could put this position in a computer, even a fairly, medium-level computer, and you're going to find how difficult it is for white to win. It's going to take a lot of moves. And there's a chance eventually he gives a draw. In fact, one of my games, I was 1,500, and essentially this exact same thing happened, is my opponent eventually just offered me a draw because he didn't know how to win. And so that's what you can do here. So just don't move your pawns. You're trying to create a mini fortress. So I hope that's helped looking at this game. There's some ideas here. And again, I'm not trying to just, say the best move, because you can use a computer, and the computer can tell you what the best move is. We want the ideas, right? We want to know what to think about, so that way if we get into a similar position, we can move forward, right? And so my main recommendation is right here. Whenever we get into this pawn structure, is you want to think about d5. If you can play it right away, do it. If you got to prepare it first, with all those moves that we've looked at before, or maybe the rook over here, before you play d5, okay, but that's your goal. And if you have that as your goal, it's going to guide all your moves, and you're going to get less of this, where you go attack, then you go defense, then you go attack, and then you go defense, and then, we kind of muddled and we're down a pawn. And I do want to also I'm just going to touch on this very briefly, because you didn't annotate any of your moves from 4 through 10 here. Okay? You said these were all standard moves. That was it. But then you said that this move, e5, you weren't ready for that. Well, it might surprise you. From here, e5's a possibility. You played knight f6, right? You could have played e5. Maybe take first. Yeah, that's better. And this is a pretty... Right? Next move. Castle, castle. Okay, he takes. Again, e5 would have been possible here. And this is the move that you weren't considering at all. e5 is a critical square in the Sicilian. It's so important. We always need to be thinking about that. And this main thrust is pretty much always white's main idea. And so you might want to look back. Start, okay, from, right here. He's pinning your knight. Your knight is, defending e5. So there's one less defender of e5. What do? Be prepared. I'm not saying e5 is the best move here, but it's certainly a move. It's certainly an idea that you should be aware of. Because it's going to come in time and time again, especially if you keep playing the Sicilian, or if you play as Sicilian and as white. You want to get this e5 in. Or, conversely, you need to be able to defend this e5. And so this is where ideas like playing queen c7 first, maybe we play a6 right away, force him to take. And now e5 doesn't work very well because the bishop's already defending it. Again, we can move the queen over here. Maybe we move the knight to h6, just so that way the bishop is always hitting e5. Maybe we play e5 ourselves, so he can't do it. Again, ideas, but we always want to think about that e5 thrust. Anyway, that's been half an hour. That's a bit longer than I planned, but hopefully that was helpful. Hopefully it wasn't just me talking and yammering long-winded. So, again, if that was useful, that was helpful, let me know. If anyone else, you've got a game you want me to look at, again, I'm happy to help. Again, the more thoughts you give me, the better advice I can give you. But that's that. Okay. So, again, check out my blog, SmithyQ.com. You know all that. So thanks for watching, everyone. Take care. Have a good night.